Okay.
Just use one hand so each thing.
Okay, I think we're sort of set. Bit of a technical issue. My notes are on this computer, but the presentation's on that computer, so I kind of gotta. And I had it in presentation mode on this computer, so now I gotta move them both at the same time. So this is going to be hella awkward and fun. So hi.
Dave, we'll make the laptop see your face a little bit.
How am I going to do
Or
this?
just scoot this way. No, other way.
Like this?
No, the opposite of that.
All right.
And scoot the laptop the other way.
All right. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. I think I can hit both at the same time. Yes. Okay. So good morning. Hi. Hi. I need another sip of coffee. Just a second. It appears that I have the unique pleasure of being the first speaker at AdventureX. I've been to 4 of these things so far, and 3 of the venues. And every year, I look forward to it. I've been in this business for about 10 years now, making point-and-click adventure games full-time. And sometimes it's easy to get a little tired or crotchety, and sometimes a little embittered about the whole thing. So it's nice to come to an event like this where I'm in a group of people who are excited and psyched and jazzed up about game design the way I was 10 years ago. I always go home feeling very inspired and ready to tackle another year. So thank you, Mark and Rebecca and Tom and Steve and everyone for having me here again so I can feed off your energy. So here is my really pretentious talk title, and engineering empathy, getting people to care. This talk is about caring, which means we're going to talk about feelings. And can you all hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Because this mic is sort of that's better. Okay. And that's our feelings are a very arcane thing. It's very hard to quantify them. There are no hard and fast rules about how you feel about things. So this talk is going to be a little meandering, a little esoteric about my own thought processes about the subject, my own feelings about it, if you will. And I really started thinking about this very deeply about a year ago. It all was started by an event, a thing that happened while I was working on Techno Babylon with James Dearden. I know I'm wearing my reading glasses, so I can't see a damn thing. There he is. And he's given me his blessing to talk about this. So thank you. I do appreciate that. I'm going to talk about a sequence that was cut from the game. This was a scene. I'm pointing at the computer like you can see it there. This is a scene in a set of puzzles that were at the very beginning of the game. And this is the very first time you're introduced to one of the player characters, the guy in blue, Charlie Regis, and you enter this room. Keep in mind, it's the first time you're playing this character. You enter this room, and you find this teenage girl sitting on a tree who is about to slash her wrists and hang herself. So you talk to her for a bit, and then she slashes her wrists and hangs herself. And that kicks off a sequence where you have to save her before she dies. And in theory, this had everything. It had drama, it had tension, it had high stakes. But for some reason, it fell very flat. And I'm no artist, so sorry about that. Nobody really cared about it. The scene did not really resonate very much. And as more and more testers played through it, we learned that most of them felt the same way. And finally, maybe much later than we should have, we took a very close look at it and tried to figure out why. Why did no one really care about the scene? Why didn't I care? And well, the answer was kind of obvious, really, when I really took a look at it. We didn't know either of these people. We don't know her. We don't know her struggle. She said something about it being a political statement, but we don't know enough about the world yet for that to have any real meaning. We don't even know anything about Regis, the character we're currently playing. We're asking the player to care about many things, and care quite deeply, on pure blind faith. We are assuming empathy where none existed. And that's why the sequence sadly didn't work. So I committed my probably biggest act of executive meddling ever, and I asked James to remove the scene completely and replace it with something else. Unfortunately, he was extremely cool with that idea. And so I'll thank him again publicly. More about that scene later. But this experience really taught me a lot, and it was kind of a big epiphany for me. It's important to care. Too often, a game is more focused on just telling you what is happening, and rarely puts effort into getting you to care about what is happening. Like, why should I care about solving your stupid puzzles? Like, why am I doing this? Just what is my motivation? Why should I be jumping through all these hoops? Not just because they're there, because I care. And at this point, I have played too many games. I've seen it all, man. And it's very hard to get me to care. But I really want to care. So how do you guys get me there? I'm going to take a step back for a second and take another sip of coffee. And talk about a term that I made up yesterday while writing this down. And I probably need a better name for it, but I call it having your dinner. And this is in reference to a scene in the TV show Breaking Bad. If you've watched the show, you might know which scene I'm talking about. It's this one, the scene where Walter White brings Jesse Pinkman home for dinner. How many of you have seen the show? A lot of you. How many of you have all seen this scene as well? Okay, so about half of you know what I'm talking about. And that's good. If you we're about to see why. The scene is great, by the way. It's funny, it's awkward as hell, and incredibly dramatic all at the same time. And I'm not alone in thinking this. Tons of articles have been written about it, all analyzing the shots and the timing and the composition and everything. But I'm not interested in any of that crap. What interests me most about the scene is that if you're watching it out of context, you have no idea what the crap is going on. For those of you who have not seen this show, you're probably looking at that dialogue and wondering, what's the big deal? And none of it really makes any sense. But if you did watch it, you know exactly what the big deal is and why this animation is so... It's not animating. Well, it's supposed to animate. He drinks a glass, looks around, and puts it down. You know why that's friggin' funny. And when I sit and think about this now, all I can think is like, man, that took balls to write, man. I mean, what a leap of faith that must have taken. This dinner scene only works if your audience has been deeply invested in the story and characters thus far. And the writer, Vince Gilligan, had the guts, the sheer chutzpah and tenacity to believe that the audience cared enough to make a scene like this work. Or maybe not, really, when you think about it. This scene, after all, takes place in the 6th episode of the 5th season of Breaking Bad's run. And every line, every moment, every action is seeped in 5.5 seasons worth of stuff, worth of context. And that's roughly 5 years, 54 episodes, 40 hours worth of character development and plot advancement, all of which are needed to get this scene and be affected by it. What Vince Gilligan has done is assumed a level of empathy that actually is there. So that's the background behind my term, having your dinner, which I loosely define as the point at which the audience's emotional investment is assumed. And at that point, it can begin to pay off. You have your dinner on time, it pays off beautifully. Have your dinner too early, falls flat. Have it too late, it starts to feel padded and drawn out. This metaphor is pretty horrible. I just really like Breaking Bad. Okay, I really like it. And going back to Techno Babylon, we tried to have our dinner so early it was practically breakfast. There was no emotional investment here. And James actually told me that when he wrote this suicide scene, he was still getting a feel for the world and its characters. And that's fairly obvious when you play it. There was not only a lack of connection between the player and the sequence, but there was also a lack of connection and empathy between the writer and the sequence. And that was very palpable. The player felt that lack of empathy, or rather didn't feel any at all. But here's the interesting thing. That slide was on for too long, so here's just another scene from Techno Babylon. When I asked James to cut the scene, at that point he had already written the rest of the game, which means he had spent years in this world, growing intimately familiar with it and its characters. And it's obvious especially in the later areas, that he began to care, and care very deeply. The later scenes in the game show a tremendous amount of care and detail, like this one. So when I asked him to create a new scene to replace that one at the beginning, he was able to approach it from a whole new angle and a whole new mental space. And the results were like night and day. This is a scene from that new sequence, which replaced the suicide scene. It's short and simple, but it's 10 times more effective. It again casts you as Regis. You get a sense of him and his partner almost instantly. They say a few lines with each other, and it's like, bam, like you're with them. You get a feeling for the world, what they are up against, and what this game is even about within 10, 20 minutes. And it was sort of an ironic thing. If I was a better producer, I would have asked him to do it much, much earlier. And he might not have been able to do this as well, as effectively, rather. James was really only able to make the scene work so well because he had such a close understanding of the world he created. And as a result, he developed a deep connection and empathy that could not be faked any other way. And this type of thing is nothing unusual. I mean, how many games have you played where it starts off slow but gets better? Or you recommend a book or a television series where you say, this is great, but you have to add the caveat of, yeah, it starts off kind of iffy, but just stick with it, it gets better. It gets brilliant as it goes on. I could think of half a dozen right off the top of my head. I love all of these things, but they start off very clunky. I mean, The Dark Tower, everyone says, the first book's boring, just get through it, the rest are great. Avatar starts out very childish, becomes the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Arrow, it was a show I was embarrassed to my wife to catch me watching, but now I unironically enjoy it. I love it. Dresden starts off very generic, and it's now I bite my nails waiting for the next one. Babylon 5, same thing. But this is expected. This is normal. The creators and writers are developing a deep connection to these worlds and characters as they're going along. And this is often said about my work, Blackwell included. You write what you know, and you write what you feel. And if you care, you have the best foundation in which to make your audience care. That can't be faked. If you don't have a feeling for what you're creating, then it'll have no heart and no soul, and it'll be very, very shallow. Not long ago, I was working on a game called Blackwell Epiphany. It was the 5th installment of a series that had been ongoing for almost 8 years at that point. And it started these two characters, Rosa Blackwell and Joey Malone. And at this point, 8 years on, I had been working with them for so long that I knew them very well. I could write their dialogue in my sleep. I knew how they'd react to everything. And I grew very, very emotionally attached to them. And I missed them. And I really cared about them. And like Vince Gilligan, and yes, I am comparing myself to the writer of Breaking Bad, because I really am that pretentious. Like Vince Gilligan, I took it for granted that the audience was already invested in them as much as I was. I could have my dinner, to use that horrible metaphor again. I could stop trying to give the audience feelings, and instead I could mess with them. And boy, was that fun. All those years of emotional investment, the audience as well as mine, could now pay off. As a creator, there's a tremendous sense of freedom and relief when that happens. And so, because I had such a good thing going, and I had an existing audience that was emotionally invested in my world and characters, and life was apparently too easy and wonderful, I naturally ended the whole thing. I don't know what that makes me, but I can think of a few words off the top of my head. So now, I've been trying to work on something new. Ever since Blackwell Epiphany, the Blackwell series wrapped up about a year and a half ago, I've been working on something new. And now I've got to build up that empathy and investment all over again. And not just for the audience, but for myself. Blackwell was good. Blackwell got really good when I really started to care. And so I've decided that it's really important that I care about what I'm doing, not just to have pride in my work, of course, we all want to have pride in our work, but actually liking and empathizing with the characters that I have created. Like I said, you can't fake that, and I'm no exception. I don't want to develop that connection while I work on the game. I don't want the game to just get better as it goes along. I want to have that foundation of caring, which sounds weird. I want to have that early, before I even start. I want to care. I feel I need to care. Because if I don't care, you're not going to. So, before I finish, I want to talk briefly about how I'm trying to do that. This is how I'm doing it. Your mileage may vary. I'm more of a narrative person. So, and this is kind of uncharted territory for me. So for the last 6 months, I had my characters, I had my setting. It's this dark urban fantasy, and I have these 5 main characters, and you can choose to go around with any 2 of them. So it's very important to me that they're all pretty well defined and that you like them. And so I've been doing that by doing a lot of writing exercises. It depends on how you approach things. If you're a more visual person, some people like to draw their characters doing various things. If you see my art, this isn't my art, by the way. These are very rough sketches that I got someone else to do. If you see my art, you know why I wouldn't do that myself. Some people would want to draw them doing various things or what have you. I'm a more narrative dialogue person. So I've been doing a lot of writing exercises, pairing them all up together, and just having them talk about whatever. And then looking at what I wrote, and then trying to decide whether or not it sounds true. And I know that once I get to that point, I would know that I made that connection between myself and the characters. So here's an early example of what I did with one of these exercises. This was written completely off the cuff, not thinking too deep about it, just writing. These 2 characters are Mandana and Eli. Mandana is a taciturn warrior type, several hundred years old. Eli is a mage who recently discovered his power about 10 years earlier. And they've been working together for about 10 years. And when I wrote this, my first thought was, okay, they've been working together for a long time. They probably rag on each other. They're like an old married couple. This is very cliche. She's more serious and he's more laid back. Okay, let's do this. So I just tossed this out. And it's awful. This is awful dialogue. Ignoring the fact that it's obnoxiously cliched, there's no subtext to any of it. Why is he tapping his cane? And why is she so bothered by it? And these seem like minor details, but it's thinking about these things, the how and the why, and the underlying reasons for why characters say what they do, that enables me to get into their heads. And from there, I could extrapolate what the world is like and what their position is in it. And when I was thinking about this dialogue, and I was thinking about the world and what I knew about it and what I had established, which was that mages in this world have a tendency to go insane. The magic corrupts their minds and they go nuts. And Mandana had seen this before. So when she sees him kind of tapping his finger uncontrollably, not knowing he's doing it, she's concerned. And right there, it added so much more subtext to this exchange. So I rewrote it, and here's the new draft. And it was such a simple change, but it was a really effective one. For me personally, this might not end up in the game, but it helped me get to these characters so well. This sounded true. It went from something being really cliched and dumb to being a little bit more meaningful and deeper. And when I realized, hi. Oh crap! God damn it! I knew I'd screw it up. Thank you. Where was I? Okay. When I realized that these were words that they would actually say, I felt connected to them for the first time. Plus, I felt really sad for Eli and his predicament and what he's going through. And then I realized, holy crap, I care. And I understood it, and that's sort of where I'm going from this. And I did this for all of the characters. This is just one example out of many. I wrote about 10 exchanges for each of the character combinations. So it's about 100 dialogue exchanges altogether that I just wrote to get into these characters' heads. And by now, I feel like I really know them all. And I feel like at this point, I'm going to care as much as I ever will in this pre-production stage. So now after all this, after a year of thinking about it, thinking about how to care, developing all these theories, thinking about my characters, it's time to, make my game. So I guess I will come here a year from now and tell you how it all worked out. Thanks for listening. Yeah, any questions, guys? Keep in mind I can barely see a thing with these reading glasses. So.
You can also do chat questions on the live stream.
Is anyone asking questions on the live stream?
Well, I just asked them to ask questions.
Okay.
Yeah. Hold
I see you. I'm going to change my glasses. Sorry. Yes, up there. Okay.
I was just wondering, when you were talking about Techno Babylon and how you wrote that first scene, how do you, I imagine that takes a lot of time, and when the game is sort of near completion, what kind of impact does having to rewrite whole things have on your time frame and things like that?
Is this no? Press the what button? Bottom button.
Hold a little, it's a little sort of red button.
There's a button. Wait, down here? Hello? Nope. Okay. Aha! Sweet. Whoa. Okay. It affected things. It was a very difficult thing to ask of James to do. It actually turned out to be not so bad. James wrote the scene in about it added maybe about a month. James, how much time do you think that added to the project?
About 2 weeks.
Okay, really? That's all? Okay, I guess so. He wrote it very quickly, and we have the full-time artist. He got it all done, so it didn't. We weren't at the very end of production. We were just at the point where we were testing it, and we got all the most of the voice acting done. And I knew that we were going to be doing pickups for the voice actors anyway, so I just told him to go crazy. We could add. It just started the two main characters, Regis and Loud. So I was going to get them back into the recording booth anyway, so we could add as much as we wanted. And it didn't. I guess it didn't change things a lot. It was still a lot to ask, and so surprisingly cool about it. Like I've worked with some developers who would not like that at all, but James was great about it. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, grand. Someone up there had a yeah.
Hi, so we're currently working on a point-and-click adventure game where the main character is deaf. So this it ties into your presentation because since she's deaf and cannot communicate as efficiently with the other characters in the game, it becomes a little difficult to try and write out different scenes between other characters since there's not as much dialogue at all. Since she's not going to be able to speak since she's a small child. How would that work out in getting players to care?
Well, like I said, it's the first step is getting you to care, and because if you care deeply about someone, like if there's someone you really care about, like I have a 2-year-old, I think she's awesome, and I can talk about ways she's awesome, and like it becomes infectious. When you care, I care. And there's this tendency in a lot of modern media to like have characters just not like each other and be very snarky, and like that was the original dialogue between Madonna and Eli was just snark, and I don't know, I find that very grim and depressing, and I like it when people like each other and get along. I find it much more interesting why characters enjoy each other's company than why they dislike each other's company. It went a little off track, but I guess my point is that you're not deaf, obviously, and so you need to try to kind of get into the head of someone who's deaf. Talk to deaf people, read experiences, try to figure out what it's like. Get yourself to really empathize with that, and once you have that, it becomes real. And when it's real and there's care put into it, then that enables the audience to care as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Anybody else? Sorry. I will let Tom handle that.
What about writing dialogue for characters that you don't like, that you don't care about? I'm thinking particularly here in Techno Babylon, is Monshu the Chinese businessman, the completely evil A-ball character?
Again, I didn't write that one.
Writing for someone that you don't actually like, and therefore you don't care about, or actively wants harm to come to.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's like even if someone's a villain, and you say this to actors who play villains, or when you write a villain or someone who's bad, no one really thinks they're bad. Even someone who's trying to take over the world, someone really, really evil, thinks they're doing it for the right reasons most of the time, or even if it's just that they enjoy it, and it's not a matter of trying to put yourself into that position of what if I was evil. It's more of trying to find that point of connection. It's that what would I like if try to find a point of similarity. Like if someone is, what if you were in a position where you could achieve something you really, really wanted? And if there's something you really want, and now you're in a position of power to do that thing, how would you act if someone was preventing you from getting it? And that's how you form the connection with some kind of villain or someone who's doing something really, really bad from a position of power. Because you will not be able to empathize with a space overlord because you're not ever going to be that person. But you can picture yourself in a position of power to achieve something you want. And that's where you develop that connection. Anybody else?
There's a question, cover rows in front of you. That's why I didn't want to pick that up.
Hi David, thanks for coming and giving us up. I have a question which doesn't actually relate to what you were just talking about.
All right. Is that allowed? All right.
So you, as you said, you started off 10 years ago kind of making indie adventure games because it's a passion, and you've since had this amazing career where you've managed to turn it into this big brand, and you've got a huge fan base.
Maybe in this room, but that's about it.
It's true, and so as far as I'm concerned, you've essentially made it as a indie adventure game maker, and I'm asking as somebody who's just embarked on a journey of trying to pursue something like that as a hobby or career or however it will turn out. But my question is, if you could go back in time and give your 10 years ago self a piece of advice, what would it be?
I think about that a lot, and because I look back at Blackwell Legacy and I look at all the things I did wrong, and but really it was the best I could have done with the experience and the resources I had at the time. I had very little money to work with. I needed to get something out very quickly. I didn't have the time. I couldn't take the time to spend 6 months trying to care about the characters. I couldn't do that back then. Now I have that luxury. So I don't know. I always think, I would change this about the game. I would change this about the game. I think the only thing I tell myself is to sleep. Because I didn't do a lot of that in the early days, and it wasn't healthy at all. So that's really the only thing I would tell myself. But I think of all the mistakes I made back then, and I give myself a little bit more slack because I was a lot more inexperienced and didn't have the resources that I do now. So I cut myself a bit of slack there.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Last question?
Yeah, I do. I have the mic already. So I'm doing research about emotional engagement in video games. That's my thing. But I'm trying to focus more on mechanics and systems and rules and structures and control schemes and things like that. Although obviously adventure games tend to be quite formulaic when it comes to in the grand scheme of things when it comes to mechanics, etc. What about, so we're talking about sort of like characters and narrative and writing here, which is how most people talk about emotions in video games. And that's all very important, but have you ever done any thought or got any ideas about how we can use the mechanics of the genre or similar genres to increase emotional engagement?
Increase what, sorry?
To make players connect more with the characters or with the game. So rather than looking at characters writing dialogue and narrative, looking at mechanics.
Well, I actually have been thinking about that, and I'm doing something a little different with the next game, which is called Unavowed. We haven't really done much with it yet. I decided to do this crazy thing where I'm doing a silent protagonist, where where you literally are projecting yourself there, and that's the main reason why I want the other characters to be more interesting and more defined, because the grunt work of the engagement is on them. And it's sort of interesting how this one little change, making the protagonist silent, is changing the way I do a lot of other things. Like how I create some random character, that other character has to be interesting and engaging, because the player character is kind of a blank slate. So I'm like doubling down on everybody else, because I can't rely on the player character to kind of keep that engagement up. So it's sort of playing with the mechanics a little bit. I mean, I'm not... I don't know if that answers the question. I think... I mean, honestly, I don't know. I'm not really one for theory. I just do what feels right, and this feels right for now. I find the people who have played the little bits of the game so far seem to really like the way it works, so I'm going to stick with it. I don't know if that answers your question at all.
It's a question that a lot of people haven't thought about, which is why I'm thinking about it.
I also find that, like, I was thinking about, okay, I want to change the interface, I want to do something really different, I want to make it feel different, and you can overthink things. And I do that all the time, and in the end, I just stick with what I know. It's like, this works, why mess with it? You know, like, if you want to create a whole new dialogue system, and it's really complicated with a lot of bells and whistles, but all it is, it does the exact same thing that a standard 3-option, a standard dialogue tree would do. Just stick with the dialogue tree. I mean, it's simple, it does the job, and it doesn't overcomplicate things.
Well, that is an online question. One online question.
Hi, online person.
Yeah, we got a question from the chat. From
where's the camera? Is it
right here?
Hi.
Red is curious about how you're going to go about introducing a large cast of characters. In visual novels, it tends to end up very front-ended, just a reel of boring characters at the beginning of the story. Mm-hmm. How do you intersperse that throughout the game?
Well, I'm very inspired by like mid-era BioWare, like Knights of the Old Republic, Dragon Age, that kind of thing, and you really cared about each of the companion characters that you hung around with, and they were introduced very sparingly. Like as you go through it, you meet one, they join you, and then you can bring them along with you, and that's how I'm doing it pretty much. I'm just sort of spreading it out.
Yeah. Ren also says you look so pretty.
Thank you. Thank you. It's Old Navy original right here.
Well, thank you very much, Dave Gilbert.
Okay.